Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze. So today we have Peter Stoddard on, and he is going to talk to us about his book, as well as a few other very interesting topics. I've been looking forward to this interview because his book was very interesting. So why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you're currently doing?
Well, I'm Peter Stoddard. Thank you for having me. I reside in Athens, Georgia, which is the home to the University of Georgia. I was born in the state of Michigan, moved to Texas, moved to Massachusetts, and finally to Georgia when I was about age 9. I attended church my whole life. Was not didn't fully embrace the Lord until late in life, and I've actually authored 5 books, 2 of which are about Christianity and colonial American history as it led to the Revolutionary War. 2 other books are about a very famous rogue Methodist author and humorist, Louis Grizzard. But getting into that, I divorced a few years ago after 25 years of marriage, and am blessed with 2 very stellar sons. And as with anyone, a divorce leads to financial hardship. And I just pressed on. I started writing books while in financial distress, and the Lord kept guiding me. Minor miracles, major miracles, so many uncanny things happened that kept me going. And so I've authored 5 books. The one you spoke of is Why Puritans Matter, Now More Than Ever. A second book along the same lines is The Richest Bostonian, my American colonial immigrant ancestor. His name was Anthony Stoddard, and he came to Boston from England in 1638. And I sometimes joke that my Stoddard family legacy is the richest that America has never heard of. Anthony Stoddard's son was Solomon Stoddard, a pastor for 58 years in Northampton, Massachusetts. They called him the Pope of the Connecticut Valley, Connecticut River Valley, and that was a derisive term. But he led harvests that kept the church alive in the western wilderness of Massachusetts. His grandson was Jonathan Edwards, whom many say is the greatest theologian ever born on North American soil. And so the theme to The Richest Bostonian is if Anthony Stoddard hadn't come along, the world would not have known Solomon Stoddard, Jonathan Edwards, or humble, insignificant me, Peter Stoddard.
Yeah, I love history. I think it's fascinating, and it's always fascinating to look at how God has worked through so many different people throughout history. And I had interviewed Leo Martin, who speaks about the Pilgrims in Plymouth, Massachusetts there. And his interview the audio was bad. So we're going to be redoing that interview. But it was still fascinating to hear him speak on all that stuff. So it's kind of interesting how your 2 kind of connect that way.
Well, Tony, that's another rabbit hole. I discovered within the last year via a DNA test that I knew I had people in the Winthrop fleet, the Puritans that came in the 1630s, but I found that I've got a Mayflower guy. He was hardly a pilgrim. He was an indentured servant, and he was a brawler and a fighter, and his name was Edward Doty, and he worked his way out of indentured servitude and kept getting in trouble with the law. He would not pay. He would not pay for cattle he bought. He would not put a fence around his pigs, but he never left Plymouth, and he paid his fines, and he became wealthy through real estate, and he was simply essential to the colony. He never served public office because he was in trouble with the law, but he served public services that made him essential to Plymouth. And there's a whole Edward Doty society, and sometimes it's as fun to have a black sheep rogue ancestor as it is to have Miles Standish. So that's a different rabbit hole. So I might have to write a book about him.
Yeah, maybe you should. Could you maybe tell us your testimony and what finally convinced you to commit your life to Christ?
It didn't really happen in a thunderclap. I was divorced, and my ex-wife and two sons we had lived in Northwest Florida. They needed better schools, and we were all from Metro Atlanta. We had joint custody, uncontested divorce, but my ex-wife and my sons moved to a really good school district area of Metro Atlanta when my sons were 12 to 15, and I was in Northwest Florida, having to sell a couple of properties to move nearer to my family. And it took longer than expected. And so I ultimately ended up buying a houseboat on Lake Lanier, a very large lake near Atlanta, which is an austere way to live. And but I was depressed. I was overweight. I simply dealt with that. And I was watching a video on YouTube, I think, and it was Andy Stanley, pastor of North Point Church, but I was not familiar with him at the time. His father is a very famous Charles Stanley, and he, in his sermon, was saying, "What do you want in life? What do you want in life? Do you want a bigger house? Do you need more toys? Do you need a newer car?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, I've been through this. I don't need stuff. I've had stuff. What I want is to get things right with my two sons, period. I don't need the material things. And at the end of that sermon, Andy Stanley said, how's this for something to want in life? To have the love and respect of your children, whether your children are kids or they're adolescents or they're young adults or they're in their 40s and 50s. How is that for something to want in life? And I was just dumbfounded. I said, he just articulated what I've been thinking throughout this entire sermon. And that's all I want. I have not yet dabbled back in romance because I want to get things right with my sons. They're now age 18 and 21, devout Christian young men. And so that rung a bell. I was baptized at North Point Church in 2020. That got postponed because of COVID. And I've joined Methodist churches because I've relocated. North Point is a blessed church, but it's not traditional. Rarely do they offer communion. They offer small groups and the like, but I aspired to Bible study and routine communion, and so that's been a transition. I have not abandoned anything. I've embraced more, and so that might answer your question.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your book as well, and then what also inspired you to write the book, how or why Puritans matter now more than ever.
Well, I should back up because as a kid, between ages roughly 7 and 9, I lived in a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, and I was just gripped by colonial history, school field trips to the Freedom Trail, to Plymouth Rock, to colonial American sites. Little did I know at the time that I had no fewer than 5 prominent Puritan pastor grandfathers, some of whom were in Massachusetts, others in Connecticut. But little did I know that I had such roots in New England, Boston, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And then after moving to Atlanta, found a family genealogy and started studying first Solomon Stoddard, and then we had a World Book Encyclopedia set from the 1960s. And the only Stoddard in there was Solomon Stoddard. And he had a 1/4 of an inch bio. But then I started studying more, and I studied more of the Puritan philosophies and beliefs. And I've done that, Tony, for maybe going on 30 years. But I was neglecting my Bible. I had questions like, okay, practically speaking, if when I die, I go to heaven, in what order am I going to see my ancestors? Will it be my mom and dad first, my grandparents, the people I've known on this earth? Or will it be Solomon Stoddard, John Warham, his father-in-law, the various pastor ancestors? Or will it be, I will see them all at once? Goofy questions, but they were heartwarming questions. And so the Puritan book, Why Puritans Matter, has been in my head for a long time. But after having written some fairly nonsensical books about Louis Grizzard, the rogue Methodist, I just said, I got to get this on paper, if nothing else, as a legacy for my sons. And I've got so many more books in my head that I better commence to writing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very interesting to look at your past and your genealogy. I think that's fascinating. Where can people find your book online?
On Amazon, if you just Google Peter Stoddard Amazon, they're all in paperback right now. One of my first book is in ebook. Right now they're on Amazon, and a couple have made their way to Walmart.com or Books-A-Million.com, occasionally Target.com. Target's a U.S. retailer, but Amazon is where you can find all my books now.
Perfect. I'll put a link to that in the description as well, so people can find you there. And in the book, you do talk about a great awakening. What would this look like in today's society?
Well, yeah, people need to understand what the first Great Awakening was. And it took place in the U.S. colonies and in Europe. The first Puritans that arrived in New England in the 1630s had a unity of purpose. John Winthrop, famous sermon, we are a city on a hill. All the eyes of all the world are upon us, and we better get this right. It wasn't a conceited claim we are a city on the hill, we're better than everybody else. This is what we aspire to do, and we better get it right. The second and third generations of Puritans, essentially, they were the most prosperous civilization on earth because they applied Puritan ethics. It was honesty, belief that God is guiding your providence, charity to your fellow neighbors, education. They built schools. Puritans believed every citizen should read the Bible for themselves. They should not be told by anybody in church hierarchy what the Bible says. You read it for yourself. So they founded schools, and literacy was more widespread among Puritans than anywhere else on earth. But prosperity led to what some people called, a spiritual drift. You're getting so wealthy, and especially out in the wilderness, you've got bears and wolves and friendly and not so friendly indigenous populations, and you're more spread out, and you might not have as much time to read your Bible. You might not have a Bible. You've got to travel further to church than people in Boston. And so there were two key people in more than two, but George Whitefield from England first came to Savannah, and he was a major orator, and he was one of the two key players in the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards, grandson of Solomon Stoddard, was in the pulpit in Northampton, Massachusetts, and he was soft-spoken and read, very nearsighted, read his sermons, apparently not real pleasant to listen to, but the power of his intellect and his words so moved people that there were revivals where many new people came into the church. So, cutting to the chase, the Great Awakening, with the combination of Whitefield, who was the orator, who was said by Benjamin Franklin, you could hear him in a crowd of 30,000 people. So he was the orator, and Jonathan Edwards was the writer. Benjamin Franklin published a lot of Whitefield's sermons because he didn't write them down. Jonathan Edwards did, and you can find much, if not all, of what he wrote at Yale University. Before 1740, which is really when the Great Awakening started to take off, that's when Whitefield started. He came back for his second tour of the colonies. People in Georgia might know a little something about South Carolina. People in Massachusetts might know something about Connecticut and Rhode Island. People in Georgia didn't know much about what was going on in Connecticut. And the Great Awakening lasted 10, 15 years perhaps, and it was the first movement that brought all 13 colonies together. The colonies like Virginia and New York were not spiritually motivated. They were founded for investment. Truly, New England were the only colonies that were founded based on theology. But revivals up and down all 13 colonies, that they alienated the Anglicans because the Anglicans liked their hierarchy. But people attending these revivals were of all races, creeds, Native Americans, slaves, typically not the aristocracy of any colony. It was typically the rank and file who were inspired that we can know God personally. We can read the Bible for ourselves, ideally, eventually, and we can exercise some independence against the King of England or the Anglican pastor across the street who's not doing much for us right now. So that's the Great Awakening of the First Great Awakening. Others say there was a Second Great Awakening. I don't get into that too much. But what would a Great Awakening look like right now? We are more divided now than ever. And I don't want to say I believe one side is righteous and the other is not. But I would say those those with whom I disagree need to understand the gospel. I don't know how to bring it to them. They need to understand that the United States, in my humble opinion, was based on Christian values. And it's what made the United States, I think, the greatest nation on earth. And freedom of speech is part of why America, and I love Canada too, but I'm not Canadian. It's why this nation is the greatest nation in the history of earth. We are the most benevolent nation on the history of earth. We're not perfect, but we are growing more imperfect when people who are devoid of Christian values, who have attained high levels of political office, seem to, at every turn, alienate Christian values in decisions they make. It's going to take a big old George Whitefield to turn people like that around. I'm not that guy. I've converted a couple of folks, but sadly I've ended friendships with folks, or they have ended friendships with me because things are so divisive right now. I'd be interested in your take on what would a Great Awakening look like today. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the divide is so large that it would definitely take a very, very big speaker, someone who knows how to really, is very charismatic. I think it would take someone like that to actually try and fix things, and someone who has a deep relationship with God. Because right now that divide, is so splintered.
And no ego.
Yeah.
And no, another rabbit hole. I have long thought former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice is, I'm quite sure she's Christian. I'm not sure, but I wish she would run for president. She's probably maybe going to become commissioner of the National Football League. But I've just thought she's as close to flawless as they come. She's never quite been preachy, but when she was in office, she's just the voice of wisdom, and she probably just would not want to consider the scrutiny one goes through to win a nomination. But to me, she's outstanding. I don't know who I would favor to lead things going forward. I'm a big fan of Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who kept us open during COVID while many states were closed. He publicly prays with his family. I've met him. I've met his family members, but I don't think he aspires to national office. So I'm tossing names out there that perhaps people in your audience might not relate to. I pray for that voice to come forward, a low ego person who wants to unite. There are those who I oppose, that their platitude is we're here to unite. I said, well, look at what you said yesterday.
Yeah.
And platitudes, and I hope deep thinkers do not buy into platitudes. I'm concerned that too many in North America don't understand history, don't know what happened. They can't tell you when the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, they couldn't tell you that Ottawa is the capital of Canada, or is that Toronto? I'm sorry, that was a joke.
Toronto likes to think they are.
I know. It's I was coming up with a place I loved in British Columbia. I know it's Ottawa, but so many people they couldn't correctly name states in the United States. I admire people from somewhere other than America who gain citizenship legally. They know more about America than perhaps 90% of people born here, and they earned it the hard way, and they can tell you communism is not good, socialism is not good.
Yeah.
It's why we're here. Again, I tend to speak too much, but it kind of gets to the gist. I don't know who are. We might need another Messiah, but we've already had one. We've already he's here. He's here in the Holy Spirit. He's visited. We're not going to get another one unless he comes the second time, and I really don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime.
None of us do know. But I think, yeah, the divide has shown how broken both our political system in Canada and your political system in the US really is, because we see it all over the world now, and it's just the systems are broken and they need fixing. And I don't know if anybody out there right now can really fix these systems because they're just so broken.
Yeah, and to the basics of Calvinism, it was kind of a democratic republic is what he espoused, and the power is in the office, in the position, not in the person that holds the office. So John Calvin never aspired term limits, and some people say, well, term limits are. We enforce them every time we go to the polling booth. That's not really true, because we've got people that have never served the private sector and they've been doing nothing for many decades in public office. But and term limits are not anything that are going to get rectified with the priorities we need to look at right now. But and a chapter in my first book is a U.S. senator by the name of Saxby Chambliss, who served 2 terms in the U.S. Senate, and he elected not to run for a 3rd term because he was the poorest member of the U.S. Senate. He was from Georgia. He was not on food stamps, but guess what? He had not enriched himself while in office. And he said, I've done my duty, 2 terms. I need to go make some money. And when I said, I wish every politician in the United States or anywhere thought the way you think, Senator Chambliss. We've got nations led by people who are full of themselves, who think they might deserve worship. They think they're our bosses. They don't realize we are their boss.
Trudeau would definitely fall into that category.
I think the best people in office who might not have a large enough voice do in fact believe we are their boss, or they work for us.
Yeah.
They serve at the will of their constituents, and that's kind of what, and that's what John Calvin espoused as well.
In Canada right now, the Conservatives have a leadership race going on, and I like two of the front runners, but one of them I think would have my endorsement more than the other, and that would be Leslyn Lewis. I know she is a Christian woman. She is not for abortion. She also is not for gun control. She has her firearms license, and she actually has a dual citizenship. She was originally an American.
Is she married? Is she married? Because I'm divorced, and if she's not married, she sounds like my kind of person and public servant.
Yes, she is married, and she's a very well-spoken woman. Was a lawyer at one point, but she gave that up because she wanted to serve the people, so is how she puts it, and so she really wants to see change to get back to giving power back to the people, because that's not happening right now in anywhere in North America. So she would have my backing in terms of that. I actually got to speak to her when she was here, and she listened and was very, very well spoken in terms of how she answered questions. One thing I would like to circle back around to is, for you, what was it like becoming a Christian so late in life, rather than someone who was like myself, where I was like 5 years old when I became a Christian, so I haven't known anything other than that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I listen to a lot of YouTube channels led by pastors who knew they were Christian from age 5. They might have begun in one denomination and changed to another, and I try to really channel this to my sons. Guys, you're young. Do it now. Do it now. And when I was attending church all throughout my young adult life and middle-aged life, there was something in me that said, if you surrender yourself, you're going to lose yourself. And I liked my rather semi-hedonistic lifestyle, and never off the deep end, but I just said, I'm not ready to surrender myself. And when I finally did, I just said, you know what? This is so much richer. This is so, I'm still a sinner. I aspire to be less of a sinner, but I just wish I went to youth camps, church youth camps in high school, from which many of my good friends went on to become pastors, after they got out of seminary, and I remained their friends, but I was just doing other things, and you can't. I don't have regret for past actions, remorse for lost opportunities, as it might say. I said, I'm just thankful it happened now, when I think I've got a lot of years left in me, and I can embrace it and become a better disciple, hopefully turn folks who were like me toward the Word, help them understand it is the Word, it is indisputable. Old Testament, New Testament, it's you read that thing, they're just there's nothing to argue with. And I wake up every day asking, what do you have for me today? Sometimes the night before, I know what I got to do the next day. Sometimes I wake up, I try to wake up giving thanks despite trials, tribulations. Thank you. They'll make me stronger. You're going to get me through this somehow. You have, always have. I don't care that I came into it late in life. I'm thankful that I came into it late in life.
Yeah, and I think that's a great attitude to have, because I think too often, like as Christians, we become so, I don't know, laid back in terms of our Christianity that it doesn't mean what it should to us, and it needs to be that deep personal feeling in your heart and in your mind that, you know, I am a child of God. I need to live for God. I need to do as God is asking me to do. And I have a lot of respect actually for people who do become Christians later on in life, simply because so many of them, you hear them and it's just like God was speaking to them so much before, and they just weren't listening. And then they had that moment where it's like, I gotta listen. And so many of us who've been Christians for so many years, it's just like we kind of miss that because we get so laid back.
Absolutely. He was reaching out and I wasn't listening. I can't tell you how many examples of that. And I'm so much more grateful now.
Yeah.
God, thank you. Finally, better late than never.
Yeah.
I want to meet you soon, but I think you have work for me to do in the next day, week, month, year, decade, or if I live to 100. Tell me what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And none of us know how long we're going to be around for. And I think that's kind of the attitude we got to have is, well, Lord, I don't know when you're coming for me or what, but I'm here to serve you, and here to be that voice for you, however I can be, and just that servant attitude is what we need to have now, and I think not enough Christians have that attitude these days.
Yeah, I look at it in an interesting. I think an interesting way is, you know, when I go to Bible study, Sunday school, church, I'm in a room full of people who are kind of like-minded. Some might be casual, some might be intense, some might be super intelligent, some might be less intelligent. But if you took the 10 most brilliant atheists in the world and you put them in the same room, it ain't going to be long before they are arguing with each other, and to the point of wanting to extinguish each other. And in Christianity, it's not that way. There are minor differences and disputes and politics within a church because we're sinners and we are flawed. But we ain't as flawed as atheists. They are 100% damnable flawed, if you'll pardon my French.
Yeah.
Unless they some of the most inspiring people to me on earth, innovators. I'll say the word Elon Musk. I hope he becomes a Christian. I don't think he is.
I don't think he is either.
Well, there's time.
I think he has children with many, many women, but
does he? Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I have a lot of respect for what he's doing, definitely. And
on the other hand, there's a Jeff Bezos. You might want to edit these out because Jeff Bezos might come sue us. I think he's sinister. I don't think Elon Musk is sinister. I didn't know he had multiple kids. I think he is more wise without the wisdom of Christianity than Bezos.
Yeah, and I would agree.
We won't go there, but I like what Musk does. I would love to learn that he received Jesus Christ.
Yeah, one of his latest tweets I really got a kick out of it was, "I'm going to buy Canada next so I can get rid of Trudeau." It was something along that line.
I hadn't seen that one. I saw a meme saying, Bezos was reaching out to Musk with something, and Bezos said, "I'm going to buy Amazon next," and Bezos said, "Bro," and Musk checked, "add to cart," add to cart. because Bezos owns the Washington Post.
Yeah.
He's on and off again, the richest man in the world. But uh, but yeah, Elon Musk buying Canada, that would be a riot. I think
Yeah.
that would be.
Yeah. Musk is hilarious. I like his tweets. He's just like Trump in terms of his tweets, just tweeting for the sake of seeing how many fires he can light.
And he doesn't care. And I'll tell you, I've got a nephew who still works at SpaceX. A very brilliant Christian nephew who was an engineer working mundane jobs, and he was recruited to work at SpaceX from day one. And he is a high-powered guy now, and I won't mention him. He Early on, Elon Musk said, "If you stick with us, you're going to become wealthy. If you stick with us, we're going to become wealthy." And I think their first 3 launches of a rocket failed, and launch number 4 was the make it or break it. And Elon Musk he went from dangling the carrot to wielding the stick. If this launch fails, you're all out of a job. And for a while, he cracked the whip. I rather gather that SpaceX employees who have stuck with it are grateful for what they've accomplished. They've done things NASA never did. And this young nephew of mine, he's on my ex-wife's side, is devoutly Christian, and I love to talk to him. And because he's from the generation where he was saying, "Man, sometimes I got to work a 50-hour week." And I said, "Okay, dude, I've worked 80-hour weeks, but you are in a very fertile place, and you are going to go far in life." So, and he didn't whine. It was just in conversation that he complained he had to work too hard. But at any rate, that's a different rabbit hole. I hope Elon Musk becomes a Christian. I pray.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. There's a lot of people out there that could have really good big influences on people, and they don't follow Christ, but I really wish that they would, because I think they would be powerful voices for Christ, and he definitely would be.
Who's the right person to send their way to get their ear? Ben Franklin, who, he supposedly attended a Presbyterian church, and he thought of God as being, okay, off in the distance. Let's admire what he has done, but we don't really have a personal relationship. Jesus Christ, not so sure about that. The Holy Spirit, that's really confusing. But George Whitefield was Benjamin Franklin's house guest whenever Whitefield would come to Philadelphia. And I don't understand how, and there's a gentleman whose name is going to escape me, a Harvard professor who researched Solomon Stoddard and then Jonathan Edwards and really revived the legacy of Puritans. That guy really brought them out of the mothballs. I won't remember his name, but I think at the end of his life, he was not a Christian. How can you be such a scholar, be so impressed by the intellects of these people that you have resurrected and not buy into what they are all about? And Ben Franklin was one of those. I could come up with the name of the guy that resurrected Solomon Stoddard and Jonathan Edwards. A lot of people still think Jonathan Edwards is undiscovered. He's become more discovered, but we got to go back to history and what made North America what it is today. You're still under the British crown, but I think Christianity has had a pretty profound influence across Canada over the course of your history. So my thought kind of runs out there. The original point being, who do we send to Elon Musk to say, Elon, you are a great dude. This is how you become greater.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that message? And he's self-effacing. He's self-effacing. That's a start. That's a start. When you don't take yourself seriously, that's a start. But don't take yourself seriously, and then welcome the Lord into your heart. You can still laugh, have a sense of humor. God created everything, including humor.
Yep. So if you were to leave one piece of advice for people who are still sitting on the fence about committing their life to Christ, what would that advice be?
I would perhaps start by turning to 3-5 people who you know fully embrace Christ. Ask for their testimony. Ask for them to tell you what accepting Christ has meant to you. A lot of the pastors that I read or listen to, Book of Mark is a good place to start. It's a short gospel that tells it quick. It's that somebody called it the rapid gospel. It just gets right to the point.
Yeah.
The Apostles' Creed is the Christian elevator pitch. Read that a few times. The Apostles' Creed. It's just what we believe. Do you have any questions after the Apostles' Creed? Talk to one of the 3 or 5 people who have embraced it for a long time. Look around you. One thing great about Jonathan Edwards is in the Age of Enlightenment, when science was taking one fork in the road and spirituality and Christianity were another fork in the road. He said, no, they ain't no fork in the road. God's responsible for it all. Science, he didn't address evolution too much. God's responsible for it all. Creation of the world, God's responsible. And he embraced it and articulated it better than almost anyone. Go out, look around you in nature. Understand that God created. Look up at the sky, the stars. God created it. If you embrace that, and even if you're wrong, which we aren't, you will lead a more blessed life, a happier life. You will surround yourself by people who are blessed and happy. And our time on this earth is not long. And there is an eternity, and there's only one way to experience the eternity, and that's through Christianity. But between now and meeting that eternity, Christianity will help you to lead a more fulfilling life than following your own instincts, trying to figure it out on your own, asking your, weird uncle, what should I do? Jesus and the Holy Spirit will advise you far better than your weird uncle or even a goofball like Peter Stoddard. Pray, and after you've prayed, listen. Yeah. You might not get an immediate answer. You'll get an answer. It might not be the answer you want, but it's the answer that God intends for you to hear.
And God is a God of humor. You can tell by just looking at all the animals he created, especially when you look at the sea creatures, especially because some of those fish out there, you're just like, oh my word, what?
The poor aardvark. Agreed.
Yeah, or the goblin fish. Like you look at the goblin fish, and it's just this.
I'm a scuba diver. I've never seen one in person, but I think I know what they look like. The Pacific octopus is not a handsome creature. It's the most intelligent invertebrate on Earth.
Yeah.
So I don't eat octopus. I will eat squid, but I have scuba dove with octopi, and they're my buddies. In fact, in Chicago, I worked as a docent at Shedd Aquarium, and I dove and volunteered, but I would also staff the gallery exhibit of the Pacific octopus, and little kids would come up and say, "Ooh, he's so ugly." I said, "Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, young man. He's the most important. He can open jars. He can crawl through, holes that are half an inch thick. He can change color, yada yada yada. He's got. I did not. I was not yet converted, and maybe the aquarium wouldn't have appreciated had I said this. He's God's creature, but he is, or she. I never knew the gender of my octopus. They didn't tell me, and I didn't know how to answer the question.
So do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here?
No, just thank you. Now I got to find the time to reach out to Ben Zambisi, the Canadian Football League Hall of Fame member, and see if he has an interest in talking to you, and scratch my brain about who else should talk to you. And I'm not going to sell you to them. I'll just say, and I might wait for this to go live, and I'll say, this is what happened. If you think this would be fun for you to participate with Tony, I'll put you in touch. But thank you for your time.
Yes, well, I appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. It's been a very great conversation, and I always like to talk history, so that's been fun.
Likewise. Thanks to you, Mr. Canadian, sir.
Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.